welcome back. Today I am doing a battle of the contour powders. The two contour powders that I am putting to the test are by Kevyn Aucoin and by e.l.f. And I had heard long ago that the e.l.f. was a dupe for the Kevyn Aucoin one, but I had never used the Kevyn Aucoin one before. I have purchased a few different palettes of this. It does come in a pan with 4 different shades in it. The one that I am referring to specifically for this video is the contour shade in it. It is this one, and this is their regular palette. They do have another contour palette out now, and it is a deeper version, but this is just the first original palette. I don't think it has a name still. I think the other one just says deep on it. I will double check and I will let you know in the description box below and on the screen somewhere here too. But for the purposes of this video, I am going to be specifically talking about this contour shade right here. As you can see, it is almost done. I've gone through several pans of this already. It is only available, as far as I know, in this palette, and it retails here in Canada for $8, I believe. Some places might be $9. But it does come with the contour shade, the bronzer. This is more of a yellowy banana shot matte powder. And then this is like a cream off-white, and it has a little bit of reflectiveness to it, almost like a satiness to it. So it's a very subtle highlight, almost matte, but not quite. But again, the purposes of this video, I will be using this specific shade, which is almost gone here. And then I am going to be comparing it to the Kevyn Aucoin Sculpting powder in medium, which happens to be this shade right here in the palette. I do find that both of these shades are quite comparable to each other, especially once you get them on the skin. The Kevyn Aucoin one I find is slightly cooler than the e.l.f. one, but I actually find that the e.l.f. one is a little bit more flattering with the hint of warmness that it has to it. So depending on your preferences, but once it's on the skin, it really isn't that detectable. I do have pictures that I will insert here so that you can get a look of what it looked like when I initially applied it. The Kevyn Aucoin Sculpting powder does come in 3 different shades, and it is $53 for that. I will get into a breakdown of the price per gram and all of that near the end. But right now, like I was saying, the colors are very similar. Once you get them on the face, they are virtually indetectable that they are different. Someone to the naked eye probably wouldn't notice, but because I was trying to see any differences, this is kind of my thoughts in wearing them together. When I initially applied them, I actually liked the e.l.f. one better. I felt that it went on easier. It didn't take as much building up. It just took one kind of dip in the pan and put it on, whereas the Kevyn Aucoin one, I did have to build up a bit. Again, I'm comfortable with my contour and using that powder, so I know how much to use. But someone might appreciate one that goes on a little lighter and they have to build it up, especially if you do have the medium one and maybe it's a little too stark for your skin and you want to go in with a light hand, that might be more your preference. But if you are a similar skin tone to me and you're comfortable with powders or with contour powders, then you might enjoy the e.l.f. one more. Like I said, I felt like it was just slightly more flattering on me when I put it on. Just it had this slightest hint of warmness more than the Kevyn Aucoin one. The other one looked just too gray in my opinion, which I know it's supposed to be a shadow, but for me, I just liked the e.l.f. one better when it went on. They both blended out beautifully. That's one thing I'm impressed with the e.l.f. palette as well. The powders, both the bronzer and the contour, just because they're deeper, so you get more of an idea of how it's blending. Both of those blend out beautifully. I've never had a problem, even when I've gone in, you know, with too heavy of a hand with either one of those powders. They've always blended out nicely, and I've been able to work with them really easily. The Kevyn Aucoin one, of course, it works beautifully, it blends beautifully. There was no problems with that. Then by the end of the day, I've always been impressed with my e.l.f. one by the end of the day. I've never had any problems with it. It was there, it looked lovely. But I have to say, when I compared the two of them together at the end of the day, the Kevyn Aucoin one just looked a little bit better. When I was comparing them side by side, the e.l.f. one looked slightly patchy, not enough that I think I would have noticed had both my cheeks been the same, but putting it to the side that have Kevyn Aucoin to the e.l.f. side, I did notice that the Kevyn Aucoin one held up a little bit better. Both were still on my skin and noticeable. It was, you could just tell that the e.l.f. one was starting to break down a little bit. Keeping in mind that this was probably 10-12 hours that it had been on my skin when I was kind of checking and remembering to look what it looked like. That's one thing I always have a hard time with when I'm doing these things, is I always forget throughout the day and the end of the day to go back and look and see what my thoughts are on how things are performing. But for the times that I did check, I have to say that the Kevyn Aucoin, it performed better in the fact that it looked like it had just been applied still, whereas the e.l.f. one, you could tell it had been there for a little while. It was still there, but it was clinging to life, sort of thing. Another point that I like to make about both of these powders is my Kevyn Aucoin powder I just got around Christmas, whereas the e.l.f. one I have had for several months now. It's obvious that I'm almost finished with it. I've hit major pan on it, and it is pretty well done. So keeping that in mind, because one is fresh and new and the other has been used and has had a brush put into it, and consequently some of my oils from my skin and all that sort of thing have gone into that powder, so that's going to reflect on that powder. It's going to make it perform not as well as had it been new, just because environmentally it has changed. But I didn't want to go out and buy a new one just for this, because I didn't want to have all kinds of contouring powders laying around, because I do want to use up the Kevyn Aucoin one that I have, because it was expensive. But that leads me to my next point. Once I am done with the Kevyn Aucoin one, I will probably just go back and purchase the e.l.f. palette. For the differences that I saw in my skin, yes, the Kevyn Aucoin one wore beautifully, but the e.l.f. one still wore really nice too. It was just that you could see a difference by the end of the day when you compared one side to the other. But had I not had the Kevyn Aucoin one on at all, I wouldn't have thought anything of it. I would just been like, hey, my contour still looks good, because I wouldn't have had anything to compare it to. Now, as for the cost of each item, they actually are pretty easy to break down, because each pan is 4 grams. So if I am paying $8 for 16 grams, that works out to $2 a pan. So I'm basically paying $2 for the e.l.f. contour, and I'm paying $53 for the powder when it just comes on its own, not in this palette here. This palette I think was $77, something like that. I'm not sure, but I'm just talking about this powder here. You can buy a 4-gram pan of this, and it is $53. You can actually purchase all 3 of these individually. Each pan would be 4 grams, and they are $53 for each individual pan. Like I said before, you can only purchase the contour powder from e.l.f. in these palettes. This is $8 for the whole palette. If I was going to break it down, this particular shade is only $2. You can also get the Kevyn Aucoin contour powder slightly cheaper if you are going for the medium one, which is the one that I use, and you can get it in a duo with a setting powder, I think it is, and it is $33, but you get 2.5 grams. You aren't missing much if you're going for the $8 palette compared to the $53 single pan that you would get from Kevyn Aucoin. This slightest difference in the tone of it, but again, not something that you really notice when you put it on, except for the fact that I really did like the way the e.l.f. one looked initially on my skin, but I do have more of a warmer, neutral to warm skin tone. So having said that, if you are more of a neutral to if you have more of a cool undertone in your skin, you may appreciate the Kevyn Aucoin sculpting powder more. As well, if you have fair skin, they do have the light version of the powder, whereas the e.l.f. only has the medium version and then a deeper version of it as well. So I guess it depends on your preferences. For me personally, I would say that in this battle, e.l.f. would definitely win. You know, I don't hate this. This is not a waste of money by any means. I'm happy to have it. I'm happy to try it. I love trying different products and different brands, high-end and affordable things, but if I'm going to repurchase it, I will definitely be repurchasing the e.l.f. one, because it because it checks all the boxes that I need it to check, and it is more affordable. But if this, for whatever reason, was discontinued or they changed the formula and it was awful, I would have no problem going out and buying the $53 powder, because it does work well. It's just, if I have the option of a more affordable one, I'm definitely going to take it. Both powders have pros and cons to them, so I think if you are on a budget, the e.l.f. one is a good option, or if you just don't want to spend that much, or you are curious if they were dupes. I hope I was able to answer some of your questions and maybe help you out with that decision. Let me know in the comments below if you have tried either of these powders and your thoughts and experiences with them. I'd be curious to hear how they worked Thank you so much for watching, everyone. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, go ahead and give it a thumbs up. I hope you have a great day. Bye-bye.